Hi, my name's Karen and I want to talk about the changes in eating and appetite for a person with a dementia diagnosis. When a person's been diagnosed with dementia, you are going to notice a change in eating habits and their appetite, and there's many reasons for that. One of them may be the medication that they have been prescribed. Some of the medications that are prescribed for an Alzheimer's diagnosis and other dementias like Aricept, Exelon, and Namenda, they may cause an upset stomach. They cause problems with the upper GI, so it may lessen their appetite. So keep that in mind, and as I talked about in some other videos when I talked about medications, you want to weigh the pros and cons. So keeping in mind that these medications don't really slow the disease, would you rather that we try the medication in hopes that they might get some better quality of life because they may be able to remember something, or would we rather that they maintain their weight and not be bothered by an upset stomach? So I think that's something to consider when looking at the whole picture with a dementia diagnosis, the medications. One of the other things that happens with dementia, with any type, is that their brain may not be giving them the signal that it is time to eat. So again, by getting them into a routine and giving them snacks, not asking them if they're hungry because they are likely to say no. One of the first words we learn is no, and one of the last words that we will say is no. The answer is usually no to almost anything you offer them, especially if they're not in a great mood. So offer them snacks and meals at a regular schedule. One of the things that may happen with dementia is as the disease progresses and they lose more and more of their memory and their brain begins to atrophy more and more, they may not appreciate the taste of food the same way they did in the past. One of the things that a person with dementia and a child both enjoy are sweets. One of my sayings is that ice cream solves everything. And my belief is when a person has a dementia diagnosis, why should we hold them to the same standards of eating your meal first and then your dessert? The fact is that when you give them something sweet, it actually stimulates their appetite. So if you have someone who isn't getting that signal from their brain that they are hungry, giving them their dessert first may be a good idea. One of the other things that you can do if they aren't really loving their meat and potatoes or vegetables is you can add a sweetener to those foods. Even though it may not sound appetizing to you, they appreciate the sweetness, and again, the sweetness actually increases their appetite. Of course, if they're diabetic, you don't want to add sugar. You can add a sugar substitute, but it really may help. One of the other things that you want to consider, and something that they may not be able to communicate to you, is they may have pain in their mouth when they eat. It could be because they have dentures that aren't fitting properly any longer. Maybe they haven't put their dentures in. Maybe they don't know where their dentures are, which could cause even more problems. So it may not be a problem with them not wanting to eat. It's a problem with them not being able to eat properly. One of the other things that can happen with a dementia diagnosis is as the disease progresses and they get into the later stages of Alzheimer's disease and some of the other dementias, and one of the other things that you want to watch out for, if someone has vascular dementia and they have had a history of strokes, or if they've had a stroke recently, one of the things that can happen is that they lose the swallowing reflex. So it becomes extremely difficult for them to swallow, and when they do, sometimes it goes down the wrong hatch. So rather than going down their esophagus and into their digestive system, they sometimes aspirate the food, which goes into their lung, and they develop pneumonia. If you notice that they aren't eating like they once did, maybe they are pocketing their food, and when I say pocketing their food, rather than swallowing, they are chewing and chewing and chewing, and they look like a squirrel by the time they've eaten a few bites because they are keeping it in the back of their mouth. If you notice that they are really salivating a lot or drooling. That's another sign that maybe they aren't able to swallow. So if you notice those symptoms, or if they have a history of stroke, or they are in the later stages of Alzheimer's disease, it is a possibility that they've lost that ability to swallow properly. Some of the things that we can do to help them when they get to that point: we aren't going to be able to prevent them from aspirating food if they aren't swallowing properly, but we can make it easier for them to drink and take in nutrition, and at least give them that better quality of life, especially if they're hungry. The fact that we know that they aren't able to swallow doesn't mean that they're not going to ask for it. So there's a couple things we can do. When they're having problems with chewing, we can soften their food for them. We can add things like applesauce to their food. We can put it in a food processor and make it a little bit easier. Nobody likes to eat baby food. So there's a couple different ways that we can make the foods a bit easier for them to swallow and chew and get into their body. There are things that can be added to food and to their drink that make it a little bit easier to go down the right hatch. One of them is called thicket, and what it does is it makes everything that they put in this chemical in, it makes it more slippery. So it actually goes down, there's a better chance it'll go down the right hatch rather than into their lungs. When a person gets to the point where they aren't able to swallow properly, and we know that they may be aspirating on food, it may be time to consult with palliative care or hospice. If we notice that there's a change in their eating habit, we notice pocketing of food, we see more salivating or drooling, that's time to give the doctor a call and ask for a swallow study, and maybe ask for a speech eval from a speech therapist, because they can be very helpful in determining what's actually going on with their mouth. Is it a problem with the chewing? Is it a problem with the swallowing? So those are some things that you can do to help the situation. I hope you learned something today about the changes in eating and appetite, and I hope you'll join us again for more caregiving tips.